welcome to Cognac and Poetry Podcast, the space where unpacking praxis, politics, and poetics happens one intergenerational conversation at a time. I am T.S. Hawkins, and I am joined, of course, by these magnificent queens, Kimmika, Williams-Witherspoon.
Greetings. What's happening, people? How are you today?
You know, still here, still making it. And yourself?
Still here, still making it. What do you say? Standing upright and breathing on time. Hey.
Close. Same similarities. And my other queen, Lois Moses.
Hello.
Oh, you got dapper on us real quick. I see this blazer situation, your foulard. What are you doing?
I'm doing Fannie Lou Hamer and Mary McLeod Bethune, talking about education a little bit today.
Okay, I see. I was like, oh, she showed up and showed out. Okay. Cool. Speaking of that, I know Kimmika loves to get us started with some poetry. So hit us up with that. What do you have on deck today?
So this is my favorite Paul Laurence Dunbar piece. It's called The Party. And it's a dialect poem. They had a great big party down at Times the other night. Was I there? You bet. I'd never in my life see such a sight. All the folks from 4 plantations was invited, and they come a trooping in like chillin' when they hear a fife and drum. Everybody dressed they finest. Hush your mouth and get away. I ain't seen such fancy dressing since last quarterly meeting day. Gals all dressed in silks and satins, not a wrinkle nor a crease. Eyes are batting, teeth are shining, hair breast back as slick as grease. Skirts all tucked and puffed and ruffled, every blessed seam and stitch. If you'd seen them with their misters, couldn't have swide which was which. Men all dressed up in Prince Albert's, swallowtails and take your breath. I can't tell you nothing about it. You ought to seen it for yourself. Who was there? Now who you asking? How you expect I go on know? You must think I stood and counted every person at the door. Old man Hub Bubba's houseboy Isaac brung that gal Melinda Jane. Her hanging to his elbow, him strutting with a cane. My, but Harvey Jones was jealous, seemed to stick him like a thorn, but he laughed with Vinnie Carter, trying hard not to let on. But a person could have noticed from the direction of his look that he was watching every step that Ike and Linda took. He found a chair and asked her, won't you sit down, with a smile? And she answered up a bowing, oh, I reckon 'tain't worthwhile. That was just for style, I reckon, because she sat down just the same and stayed there till he come to fetch her to join some sort of game. Then I hear her saying proper as she rises to get away, oh, you really must excuse me, for I hardly cares to play. That was just for style, I reckon, but because you hardly cares to play, but I seen them in a minute with the others on the floor, and there wasn't any one of them playing anymore. Coming down the floor, bowing and swaying and swinging, putting on high-tone manners all the time that she was singing, oh, swing, Johnny, up and down and swing it all around. Oh, swing, Johnny, up and down and swing it all around. Oh, swing, Johnny, up and down and swing it all around. Fare thee well, my darling. Had to laugh at old man Johnson. He's a caution now, you bet. Hitting close to 100, but he's spry and nimble yet. He hollered out a sort of giggling, I ain't told, I'll let you see. Tain't no use in getting feeble now, you youngsters. Just watch me. And he grabbed old Aunt Mara, weighs 300 more or less, and it spun around the cabin swinging Johnny like the rest. Everybody laughed and hollered, go it, swinging Uncle Jim. And he swung a 2, I reckon, like a youngster who but him. That was better than young Scott Thomas trying to be so awful smart. You know, when they gets to that singing and they come to that there part in some lady's brick house, in some lady's garden. If you don't let me out, I will jump out. So fare thee well, my darling. Then they gets a circle around you and you got to break the line. Well, that donkey was so anxious like to bust himself a trying. Kept a blundering around and groping till he give one great big jump. broke the light and lit head foremost in the fireplace right plump. And the fire in it, mind you. Well, I thought my soul had bust, tried to my best to keep from laughing, but it seemed like die I must. You ought to see that man a scramping from the ashes and the grime. Did it burn him? Such a question. Why he didn't give it time. Throw them ashes and them cinders every which way, I guess. And you never did, I reckon, clap your eyes over such a mess. For he surely made a picture in a funny one to boot, with his clothes all full of ashes and his face all full of soot. Well, it lacked to stop the party, and I reckon like it's not that it would if Tom's wife Mandy hadn't happened on the spot and invited out to supper. Well, we scrambled to the table, and I'd like to tell you about it, what we had, but I ain't able. Mention just a few things, though. Though I know I shouldn't oughta. For I know it'll start a hankering in your mouth, and your mouth will mince the water. We had wheat bread white as cotton and egg pone just like gold, hog jaw billing hot and steaming, roasted short, and ham sliced cold. Look out! What's the matter with you? Don't be falling on the floor. If it's gonna affect you that way, won't be telling anymore. There now. Well, we had hot chitlins, and now you're trying again to fall. Can't you stand the hell about it? Suppose you've been and seen it all. See them great big sweet potatoes lying by the possum side. See that coon and all his gravy, reckon then you'd up and died. Mandy hollered, y'all must excuse me, there wasn't much upon my shells. But I's done my best to suit you, so sit down and help yourselves. Tom hollered, I don't believe in apologizings and professings. Let them take it like they catch it. Elder Thompson, that's the blessing. Wish you'd see that colored preacher cleared his throat and bow his head. One eye shut and one eye open. This is every word is said. Lord, look down in tender mercy on such generous hearts as these. Make us truly thankful. Amen. Pass that possum if you please. Well, we ate and drank our potion. Well, there wasn't nothing left. And we felt just like new sausage. We was most nigh stuffed to death. Tom, he knowed how we be feeling, so he had to fiddle around. And he made us clear the cabin floor to dance that supper down. Jim, the fiddler, chewed his fiddle, put some blossom on the bow, set a pine box on the table, mounted it, and let her go. He's a fiddler now, I tell you. And he made that fiddle ring, so the oldest to the youngest had to give their feet a fling. Jigs, cotillions, reels, and breakdowns, cordials, and a waltz or two. Bless your soul, that music winged them, and them people like the flute. Cripple Joe, their old rheumatic, danced the flow from side to middle, throwed away his crutch and hopped it. Ha ha! What's rheumatics against the fiddle? Elder Thompson got so tickled that he lacked a loser's grace, had to take both feet and hold them, then to keep them in their place. And the Christians and the sinners got so mixed up on that flow that I don't see how they parted if the trumpet chanced to blow. Well, we danced that way and caffered in the most ridiculous way, till the roosters in the barnyard cleared their throats and crowed for day. You ought to been there, for I tell you, everything was rich and prime, and there ain't no use in talking. We just had one scrumptious time. The party. Paul Laurence Dunbar.
Yes. Yes.
No say.
That is my absolute favorite Paul Laurence Dunbar poem. You know, he was one of the most prolific and probably the most famous Black poet that we've ever known, really. Born in 1872 in Dayton, Ohio, dying in 1906 because of tuberculosis. His parents were enslaved Africans from Kentucky, so he had this rich access to memory and history about that period. And he was encouraged to put it in his poetry. Of course, we know that, you know, he ended up having to work as an elevator operator, you know, because of his colored station. But he was the most famous poet that we have ever known.
Yeah. Ooh, I loved it.
You did that.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's gonna be going into this one. What inspired you to share that particular piece with us today?
Well, you know, as we talk about, you know, this afternoon's, this evening's topic of revisionist history and critical race theory, you know, the fact that our young people are not being taught the experience of the enslavement process, and both we're reminded oftentimes of the horrible parts of the torture and the domestic terrorism, but then we forget that these individuals were able to come together and form community and to build relationships and to find or eke out joy and life even in the midst of horror and oppression. And so I thought it was apropos to go and dust off Paul Laurence Dunbar.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Today's topic is a lot. Mm-hmm. it's a lot. And I want to start off as we're talking about revisionist history, more so, centering critical race theory. So there was an article in the Indy Star that talked about this bill in Indiana, where it limits what teachers can say about race, history, and politics, and they must remain neutral on topics including Nazism and Marxism. And then there was another article listed in AP News about the Florida district who canceled this seminar for history teachers and social studies teachers in regards to civil rights, in terms of talking about the civil rights movement, because they said, to quote, it hadn't been screened to be free of critical race theory, and critical race theory is divisive and race baiting. What are our thoughts on that? I know this group of people has stuff to say regarding that.
Well, first of all, I'm dumbstruck because you have to remain neutral on Nazism. So I don't know what to say after that.
Mind you, this was a bill that's being passed in Indiana. So, I mean, it's happening everywhere in little nuggets, and people are doing their own little thing in regards to CRT. But this one just struck a chord with me in Indiana in regards to, wanting to stay neutral on those particular subject matters, right? And then limiting what people can say in regards to race, history, and politics, all the things that this nation makes money off of.
I think all of those individuals who say that they love this country and that they love what it was built upon, constitutional rights, should have a problem with all of this. The idea that a seminar needs to be screened sounds a great deal like censorship to me. That's impacting what I've been told are my God-given rights as a citizen in this country. And the fact that we're not up in arms and that there's a whole cadre of individuals rallying behind this attack, this lynch mob that's trying to sort of, gaggle the presence of honesty and truth in our country is problematic. It's scary.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was taken aback by it because even though I teach English and theater and playwriting, I throw all of those things in the mix, because education should be cross-curricular and it shouldn't be compartmentalized that way. That was my little soapbox. All of these things are important to how especially these young bodies are moving through the world. So I don't understand how, how we say, I don't understand, but we do understand. I don't understand how learning the truth about how this nation was founded basically on the backs of Black and brown bodies, and how everyone else gets the profit off of that except for the Black and brown bodies. I don't understand how that's a problem.
But my husband and I were talking about this, and he actually coined the phrase vernacular hijacking. So when you think about, and I think about CRT in that way, because number one, we know it's this is about African-American history and critical thinking and consciousness. CRT has nothing to do with that. CRT was developed in legal and academic institutions around the idea of really addressing and looking at how certain systems maintain a certain level of inequity amongst different groups. So it's the hijacking, once again, of language in order to, as I say, oftentimes their legislation means our annihilation.
All day.
It's no different than the ways in which, colonizers purposely try to separate individuals who could speak the same language. It's a way of control. It's a tool of oppression, and we need to call it what it is. What you're telling teachers is that you can no longer teach truth. You have to teach a script. And if that's not a violation of our constitutional rights, then I don't know what is. And what makes me so angry is that these individuals who are rallying behind this movement, you claim to love this country. You claim to love what it stands for, but you're willing to eradicate the very documents that help to make it what it is. And so it's wholly problematic. And I think our young people, when you look at the educational systems across the country, our young people are competing against cultures that are in school from 8 in the morning to sometimes 5 or 7 o'clock at night, that they're being inundated with so much information. And our young people will not be able to compete if we can't tell them the truth, if we can't teach reality. We're crippling the majority of our community, not just our community, but our nation. We're crippling them to a very narrow view of the world.
We are. We're definitely giving them a bad bill of sale for certain.
Well, and think about it. There was, you think about the fact that this is a country where certain people had 400 years head start, and as we say, for privilege, and we can. Yet it wasn't far enough that we can still see them in our, they can still see us in their rear view mirror. That's how, and, so part of, I contend that some of it clearly is fear and fragility. And, the idea that somewhere along the way, there might not be a position or the inability to compete against those people who have been oppressed and shown themselves to be able to make up the difference.
Right.
But with that 400 years head start, is it really fear, or is it just a more malicious kind of domination? You just want to dominate. It's ethnocentrism, honestly. That I believe that I need to be on top to such a degree that I'm not even going to allow you to think or know what you know. Oh my God.
I think it's a mix of both, to be honest. It is both fear and exactly what you said. Because what happens is it's like, oh, if I continue to tell people the truth or give them access to the truth, they may want to do to me what I did to them. Like the fear is in the retaliation once you get that knowledge. That's where it sits. So like, yes, capitalistic structure, we still want to do what we want to do and get what we always got. And like, ooh, like we know how bad. Like we know how bad we came over and we just slaughtered nations. Like just cut through them like weeds. So do we want that to happen to us? Nah. So we're not going to tell them that. We're just going to say it was a nice Thanksgiving dinner.
Well, and remember the proof is in the pudding too, because wherever there's been access or spaces where there is a seeming opportunity for meritocracy, we've shown ourselves to be formidable and oftentimes in leading the race. So, and that is on top of the fact that we have never had an opportunity in this country for a fair fight or fair race from the beginning. And so I still contend that there is a certain level of fear, and not only that, but even looking at the propaganda is centered around fear of the other.
That's what it is. that propaganda. And so like when I'm hearing comments and things that are being like, not just comments, but also things that are being written in articles saying that CRT is divisive and race baiting, I'm like, the reason why we have race is because y'all decided that race was a thing. We're going to separate people based on the color of their skin, how they practice their life, X, Y, and Z. So how is it that now we're unearthing more truths? We are now the perpetuators of like being divisive and race baiting. Everything ain't got to be about race. Like, that's crazy to me.
Everything is about race. And critical race theory, we say again, as Lois mentioned, it comes out of legal studies. You know, it really only deals with how we in the court system, in the judicial system, how we deal with individuals who have been the victim of systemic racism, institutional racism. That's all it really was patterned after. To apply that to an educational system and to limit the educators from doing just what their job is, to educate, is problematic. I mean, if we're only going to read scripts and become automatons, we can just use AI, artificial intelligence. You don't actually need an individual in front of the classroom if you just want to spew lies. And doesn't it sound like what has happened in other countries and in other cultures in other decades, when people are pushing a narrative, the propaganda, as Lois says, pushing a narrative that is counterintuitive to humanity? Why aren't we thinking this through? Why aren't people angry? Why aren't we mounting a resistance for this hijacking, as your husband says, for the hijacking of truth? Well, I'm so tired of it.
And just to piggyback on what you said, the fact is, remember, we have to go back to the Rittenhouse case when we talk about language. The fact that the judge said you could not call the slain victims, and we couldn't talk about his initial intentions. You could only talk about how he felt frightened for life and alarmed when the quote unquote victims fought back. So you know what I'm saying? That's, you talk using now the law to, like I said, you know, to reframe and elevate certain people and how they view the world versus other people, and give them, you know, really give them a not a timeout anymore. I mean, you know, give them a pass.
A pass. Yeah, that's what it is.
And it happens in like other, like, it's like education is not the only space and where this is happening. Like we've seen it manifest in numerous different ways. When we're saying Black Lives Matter, it automatically became All Lives Matter, or Blue Lives Matter. There's always has to be. I was like, I don't understand. We're just saying Black Lives Matter, period. We're not saying Black Lives Matter, comma, and yours doesn't. Like, I don't know, like, where the imaginary punctuation that comes in when a statement is being made to center Black and brown voices. Like, I don't.
Well, did you hear about the woman in, I think it's Tennessee, I'm not sure exactly where it was, but she was sentenced to 6 years in prison because she tried to vote. She was a felon, and she had been actually written out the paper. She was given instructions by, I don't know if, I can't remember the organization, but the voting registration organization. She was given instructions of how to fill out the paperwork because she was trying to vote. Right. And yet, on the other side of it, the person who voted twice, one for himself and his dead wife, was given probation. And this was two different people. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And he was given probation and a fine. She's 6 years. And she was doing what she was told to do in terms of filling out the paperwork. And what they said was that it was criminal for her to actually apply to vote because she was a felon, former felon.
Yeah, but we're used to the ways in which a right, a civil right, a human right, a legal right can be usurped at any given time. I mean, we're used to it, but we can't be used to it. We
can't.
We can't take it. We have to continue to battle those individuals. I think it's Amir Baraka who said that, to control a person's language, or maybe it's Frantz Fanon, to control a person's language is to control the person. We cannot allow our civil liberty of being able to speak the truth being taken away from us. And the teachers associations are huge organizations. They have tremendous lobbying power. Who's running this campaign to fight against the ways in which, not CRT, but the ways in which censorship is happening in our schoolrooms?
Like, that was my soul.
Sometimes we just gotta. Oh God!
My soul.
And you put in there. I was listening to a documentary on Dr. King, and one of his supporters said, if the surviving lions don't tell their stories, the hunters get all the credit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's why all of us are storytellers.
So when we try to teach our young bodies, whether we birth them into the world ourselves or as educators who are in charge of molding those young minds, like we start to teach them about who they are, I feel like how is that the problem? Right? And someone made a thing, it's like, oh, well, it's because the other students are going to feel bad, like it's not their fault, that they're beneficiaries of race and racism. But I'm like, we have to teach them. We have to teach them where their privileges are coming from. It's not about making them feel bad. It's about like, well, we can't teach you about Dr. Martin Luther King unless we talk about why he was assassinated and why he was leading all these Black and brown people. Like, why are we celebrating his birthday if we can't teach why he was doing what he was doing in the first place?
Well, and if you take away the why, eventually you're going to take away the what. So that what will we be able to teach? And at what point do we say that teaching George Washington is also affirming privilege? I mean, that's what it is. If you say it is for one case, it is for the other.
Someone told me that George Washington was an underdog, and I almost lost my.
Well, but that's the point. You can talk about the kidnappers and the the enslavers and so on, but you can't talk about, we can't talk about the perpetrator. In other words, you can talk about the enslaved, but you can't talk about the perpetrators. That's what it is.
America is the bad guy. Let's be honest. America is the bad guy. I think in one time that they weren't the bad guy. Was it like World War I? Was it one of the world wars? Whatever which one it was.
World War II.
Two? Okay, cool. I asked, is it which one of the world wars?
No. Right? Yeah, absolutely. And
the one time we were Superman. Okay, the one time, like outside of
I think that's
America
the problem.
Is the bad guy.
I think that's the problem. And that's the definition of ethnocentrism. When you believe yourself to be so superior that nothing else matters, that's problematic on so many levels. And rather than owning who we are, owning how we've come to be who we are, and owning our responsibility to be better tomorrow, we'd rather reframe the truth, reframe the narrative. Right. But how long does that last? Because the information is there. What will happen next? Are they going to start burning books? Oh my God, it sounds like that other country that we keep talking about. I mean, are they going to close down all of the libraries? Are we prepared to cut off the internet?
But they are doing those things. Like they are like net neutrality, all that kind of stuff. They are doing things. A new list just popped up about new books being banned, and I had to literally chuckle. Because more than half of this long list was considered required reading for me from 8th grade through high school. Mm-hmm. So I'm just like, oh, so now we can't do, we haven't been able to do 1984 for a while. We haven't been able to do Animal Farm for a while because that was the truth. But they just recently banned like Color Purple. I was like, how are we banning the Color Purple?
The Color Purple?
Bluest Eye and the Bluest Eye again.
Like,
Lewis I was on that list. I saw that.
And I'm like, oh, they just banned The Giver. And I started cracking up. I said, listen, y'all, out of all these other books, like, I kind of get it, right? I'm cracking a joke. I was like, okay, all these kind of books, I kind of get it, because it is putting all America's dirty laundry, just hanging it out there. Everybody seeing your little shit stains. I see it getting in your feelings. But I was like, The Giver, though, you can't get no more imaginary than that. So now we're just banning feelings. Like, that's what we're doing.
Well, but my problem is whose feelings? Because like that little picture, if you saw Ruby Bridges, the picture of, if she can withstand, you know what I'm saying, the torment that she did, then at 5 years old, then 10-year-old
education.
It's absolutely, and so for me, it comes down to, once again, who we are as people and as humans and human beings is dismissed, in the sense that understanding that when our story isn't told, we are traumatized again, and we are rendered obsolete and clearly unimportant. And it's almost like lack of citizenry once again.
We're assigning weight, some sort of, monetary or social conscious weight to guilt over trauma. And that's problematic.
Sure.
On a whole lot of levels. But here's what I want to know. Are we still teaching Uncle Tom's Cabin? Are we still teaching what's the one, Huckleberry Finn? Are we still
Huckleberry Finn was on the ban list like a couple years ago, and then it got taken off. And it's on the ban list because the use of the N-word. And there were a lot of folks like that was a language at the time, and it got on the ban list is because there were a lot of teachers who didn't look like us, just casually just kept reading that word out loud, and they're like, "But it's in the book," and I was like, "Okay, so that's our argument. That's all it takes nowadays. Oh, because it's in the book." And so when people kept complaining, they're like, "They're complaining about the N-word again." They put it on the ban list, and then they recently took it off. And then it became controversy in a university because the professor was doing it again. That one fluctuates because they want an opportunity to say that word any old given time anyway.
Absolutely, but here's the thing, if we really believe in what makes this country, the parts that make this country great, I have to be willing to see and hear you glorify that writer, as well as to glorify, the writer of something that, tells a different side to the truth. Because truth has perception, it has different perspectives and entree into it. And if I only tell one side of the story, if we only hear Custer's story, then we never get the Native American side of the story. And that's a problem, that we have to recognize across the board. And education should be able to tell both sides. And if we don't, we really, we're really dooming ourselves.
And it's also like we are like, and there's also like another list of books that made it, Grapes of Wrath, Catcher in the Rye, Beloved are also on the ban list this year. But when we talk about when we talk about like education and the system, yes, we know the education system. When education became a system, that's a whole other thing. But also, education is from like the community and the village, and so as someone who's Kimmika and I are actively right now in teaching young minds in different stages in development. Unpopular opinion. The people in y'all communities and homes ain't up to snuff either. Like, it makes it actually complicated for us to do our jobs.
Right.
When parents go to board meetings and say specific things about CRT, or having to learn about indigenous culture, or still being pissed off that there's a Black History Month. Like I give students homework and then it's like, well, they have 7 other classes. It's too much homework and this and that. Like, everyone wants to push back on like the actual tools that we're giving these young minds to succeed. And then in the same pushback, in the same breath, they're saying, well, teachers ain't doing their jobs. How, Sway?
Right. I mean, we're institutionalizing dumbness, which is, you know, we're not requiring of our students to know, you know, what makes the world, you know, and if our worldview is only shaped by this narrow definition, like I keep saying, you know, we're competing against countries like China. I mean, those students are in class literally from 8 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night.
I mean, I don't know if I'm about that life, but I'm saying if we valued education, America as a nation, the way other dynasties have valued education, I don't think we wouldn't be far behind. Like, because the brick and mortar school should not be the sole place in which learning ends and begins. Like, it starts once you come out the womb. Your village should be helping to shape how you're going to learn, how you're going to grow. You know what I mean? And so, like, education is just a tool to continue to mold you into the person, the human that you want to be in the world. And not saying that everybody has to have the same. I mean, you know, why you want everyone to have access to knowledge. You want to say same education that may not read well. But I'm like, everyone should have access to knowledge and growth. And that starts at home. And the brick and mortar.
It should start at home, but you know, but again, I think we have to, you know, there's a challenge to our community. You said something very interesting there. If other parents are coming to school board meetings and screaming, oh my God, they're teaching, you know, about the enslavement process, then there should be a whole bunch of other folks who look like me and you screaming, yes, and we need to do more. So that the challenge to my community is, you know, I'm back again on that vote. You know, we should be at every one of those meetings. If it involves our community and our children, why aren't we involved?
Why aren't we at a school board meeting like that? And don't get it twisted, my mama couldn't go to every school board meeting either. Like, she had 2 kids to raise. Like, she was teaching in a completely different district than we went to school. Like, you know what I'm saying? So, like, life exists.
But there are ways.
You could go.
But there are ways, because one of the things that disturbs me is that they've given agency now to parents to police teachers. And so, you know, and to actually, and I think it was Indiana or one of the schools is actually talking about that they can review, they have parent committees reviewing curriculum, which is, you know, so in many ways that is problematic as well. And if they're doing that, like Kimmika says, we also have to have, and if you can't make the meeting, then you call.
Send a proxy.
Send letters.
Send your girlfriend.
Exactly.
You know, well, there were ways that we negotiated institutional racism for years and years and years. If someone had to do X, Y, and Z, then you pick the person who could go, and that individual was the representative for this block or this group or this community or this family. We need more of that. We have to return to a collective sense of advocacy and urgency. And right now, you know, that's the challenge. That's our challenge for our community.
Absolutely. Like, I think, and so, like, one of my privileges I acknowledge is, like, I was blessed to be born into a family of educators. My father's an educator. My mother's an educator. So I was screwed. I couldn't say the teacher did anything to me, even if the teacher did. They like, nah, bro, you wilding. Like, you know what I mean? So you know, it was tough. And so my education started at home. And I know a lot of folks consider that a privilege because they don't have access to those particular things. So, however, you are going to school, talk to your teachers. I had report card conferences. You know how many people came to those? They scheduled their appointment because they had to, because we was going to report them like truancy. But, like, not many parents attended. And mind you, we in a pandemic, so it's on Zoom, so it's not like, you know, whatever. It's like, have a conversation with me. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, I'm approachable. Like, I get it. I'm one of 8 teachers that your child has. Totes get it, and you probably want to go to the one like where you feel like they're jacking up the most. Cool beans, but like, let's have a conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I've said it before in other conversations that we've had, but you know, when we no longer were schooled by individuals from our community, we lost a connection to our teachers, and our teachers lost a connection to our students. It doesn't mean that every student has to look like you, but you do need to know that this individual is invested in your child's success, and vice versa. That this child really sees this professor, this educator, this teacher as someone who is invested in them and who has some knowledge to partake. But like you said, life happens. You know, if many of our individuals are single parenting, or if they're working 2 jobs in order to support whatever their family is, it does become cumbersome, time consuming to kind of to take the investment and go forward with it. But it's what we have to do. It's what our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents fought to do, to just be able to read and to write and to learn and to critically think. And we want to pass that privilege on to our children. We know that there are individuals who see us in various ways that as if we are inhuman, and stealing the ability to be educated about the world, again, is how you control the people. And so we must continue this fight. It can't just be a fight, you know, that we do on social media if we hashtag something. That's not it. We got to show up. We got to show up at board meetings. We've got to vote for superintendents of schools. We have to look at the legislation that's you know, a referendum that's going through our community, because they're stealing away our civil and human rights bit by bit. And
they're hoping that we don't notice.
Well, and they're stealing our future, and they're stealing our future. And that is the thing that is really, because one thing I realized is when I was teaching or running the school is that if you don't know who you are, you'll believe anything anyone tells you. And it is something, and it's doing something, and we know to our children in terms of their psyche and their inner spiritual life, in terms of understanding who they are and hope. Because I really believe that we are robbing our children of hope for the future as well.
Yes, and we know the
hope is a little bit dangerous. It depends on who's giving that hope. Hope is dangerous.
Depending upon what kind of hope it is, or you know, that's right. Who's giving it? You're right. And the school to prison pipeline is real, and so you know, at every stage we have to demand honesty and truth, and not one person's truth, but a balanced representation, so that we can find our way through it. That's what critical thinking is, and so you're robbing our kids of the tools to conduct critical thinking.
And think about it, because none of this is new. Because I mean, I got on my phone one of those, you know, what happened in history, and it was 1909, and they were talking about picking up brothers who were quote unquote unemployable, 200 vagrants, because it was supposedly because they didn't want to work. And where did they go? This is 1909. In the prison. And then what happened in prison? They got a job.
Convict labor.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is none of this is new in terms of the pipeline. You know, it's been reconstructed. Now they start a little bit earlier in terms of the educational process, but none of this is new. And we have to understand, like you said, how laws have been used to justify the continuation of dehumanization and control of a population. Or
absolutely, and particularly, and it's not gender based, because it affects both, you know, our children across the spectrum. But you know, one of the chief ways to maintain control over people is to stick the men away, and they've been doing that for years. Convict labor was one of the systems. You know, the Say No to Drug movement, sticking people in jail for a half a joint, and now it's the denying of an education. And I know it's difficult. It's difficult to raise babies. It's difficult to teach at home when you're tired and you come home from working 2 jobs. But we've got to figure out ways to do it. And maybe it means examining that nuclear family.
Yeah.
And going back to the ways that the extended family had to live either in the same house or in close proximity, so that there's help to do this. But We
Or
can't
create
let them get
villages
away.
or towns. Absolutely. Create
Mhm.
villages, recreate villages or town, because looking at first they tried to deny and dismiss. If they can't deny and dismiss, they try to discredit. And if you can't discredit, they destroy and dismantle.
There you go.
Yep. There you go.
There
So
you
in
go.
order in order in order to preserve our Black futures, we're gonna get some epic memory. So gotta go back to the past just a little bit. So we have Lois, who always hooks us up with some amazing epic memories. I'm ready. We're gonna be talking about Alice Dunnigan, who was the first Black female House correspondent. So let's learn some more.
Alice Allison Dunnigan was the first African American woman to gain press credentials to the White House, to travel with the U.S. president on a campaign, to get press access to the House and Senate galleries, Department of State, and the Supreme Court, to be voted into the White House Newswomen's Association and the National Women's Press Club. Dunnigan was born April 27, 1906, in Russellville, Kentucky. She learned to read before entering the first grade and was writing one-sentence news items for the local newspaper at 13. In 1923, she completed a teaching course at Kentucky State University and began teaching in the Todd County school system while taking courses in journalism at Tennessee A&I University. Dunnigan moved to Washington, D.C. in 1942. In 1946, she became a Washington, D.C. correspondent for the Associated Negro Press, the first Black-owned wire service supplying more than 100 newspapers nationwide. She began covering national politics. Named the Associated Negro Press's bureau chief in 1947, Dunnigan received her Capitol Press Pass in July 1947 and quickly followed up with a successful request for White House media credentials. In 1948, Dunnigan became a full-fledged White House correspondent. She was the first African-American journalist to join the press corps accompanying President Harry Truman's re-election campaign. She had to pay her own way. During her years of covering the White House, she posed questions regarding the burgeoning civil rights movement and the plight of African Americans in America. Her autobiography, A Black Woman's Experience from Schoolhouse to White House, was published in 1974. Alice Dunnigan died May 6, 1983.
What?
She used to have to literally pawn her watches in order to, buy essentials.
Well, and the ways in which we treat journalists is still problematic. I think back to my days on, I won't say what paper because not cool, but I think back to my days on a particular paper where I had to write for 6 cents a word. So in order to pay the gas bill, you had to kind of get wordy. But so we got to do better, and that could be why, the Black press doesn't, I don't want to say has failed us, but doesn't do the same kind of job that they used to do in days gone by in informing and educating our people.
It's about a little bit of a pivot, but I feel like that's a whole nother segment that we can get into. I already made a note about it, so don't worry now. So thank you, Lois. For sharing Alice with us. I look forward to learning more about her. And as always, we want to thank y'all for just taking the time to just sit and chat alongside, holler back at the screen, whatever makes you feel comfortable. And so as you continue on with your day, we want to wish you peace, prosperity, and poetics. Bye.